Hello, everyone. This is Coach Matt for the Seattle Chess School. Tonight, let's do some puzzle practice, specifically the puzzle streak feature here at leechess.org. In puzzle streaks, the object is to get as many in a row as you can. Time is not a factor, so you can take as much time as you want on any one puzzle. On these ones, you also get one skip, which means if one specific move is too difficult to solve, you can have a skip, and then one move will be given to you, and you may have to solve the rest of the puzzle. So here, what we're going to practice with these puzzles is how to solve a vast majority of these puzzles in Puzzle Streak. And this is also true of most puzzle trainers, which is the concept of check, capture, and threat. So this means that on every time it's our turn, we look at all of our checks, we look at all of our captures, we look at all of our threats. And with these puzzles, in many cases, you will be combining checks, captures, and threats, or a check threat, or a capture threat, or a threat capture, something like that. Sometimes we will use all three. In each of these puzzles, we will look primarily at checks, captures, and threats to solve a vast majority of these puzzles, probably all of them. There are a few types of puzzles here at Lee Chess. For example, there are ones where we will start off in check, and the object of the puzzle is to find the best way to get out of check, which I guess might fall under the threat category of what we're trying to practice here. Okay, now I'm only going to be competing against myself. My record here is 108. I do not know if that is good or not. At this moment, this particular streak, we have done 56 in a row. So what we will do is look at all of these puzzles from a check, capture, threat point of view, and I will try to get as many in a row as I can. And I guess we will end this only when I mess up and actually get one wrong. Now, one of the great things about these Lee Chess puzzle trainers is that it really emphasizes precision. There are certain puzzles where you might actually guess a move and it will actually give you an advantage, but there was a continuation that was better. These puzzles are always looking for the better continuation. Okay, so here we have, we're a white to move, find the best move. We have a queen ending. We have a king. Both kings are out here in outer space a little bit, and looks, both sides kings look fairly precarious, but it is our move. Okay, so the first things we will do is look at our checks. So we've got a check on F8, a check on G7. And by the way, we will also look at all the insane checks or insane captures, insane threats, that type of thing. Insane meaning what looks like most probably a really bad move, but you look at it anyway. So this means we look at G5, we look at H4, and we also pay attention to queen takes H7, which is both a check and a capture. Now, I would say that G7 is out. I would say H7 is out. G5 is out. All those three are insane. So we would look, first of all, at F8 and H4. Now, if we play queen to F8 check, then when the king moves to, my guess, G5, because if they go to H5, maybe there's a queen F3 check. But either one of these moves, white looks like they're going to run out of threats really quickly. You won't be able to transfer the queen to F4. And if king to G5 and you go back to E7, you're not making any progress. So my guess is that it's not queen F8 check. Queen H4 check is interesting because it forces the queen trade. Whether black just simply gets out of the way, we could trade queens, or black could trade queens straight away with queen takes H4. This is interesting because then we will get into a king and pawn endgame, and this king and pawn endgame might, in fact, be winning due to the fact that black has got two weaknesses over here, and there's also a couple of squares in the center that might be very difficult for black to guard, just in case we get our king into this area. So queen to H4 is certainly something worth looking at. I would also note the capture on E5 and B4. Both of those are insane, but we would note them. Threats, well, we really can't make any threat to the queen. And the only threat that we could make to the king is, in fact, queen to h4. No other move really makes a threat. G4, I guess G4 is the only threatening move because it does threaten G5, distracting the king away from the pawn. But G4, of course, opens up the white king and allows queen takes D3 check. So we would reject that just due to that continuation. So because of all of this, it would seem to me that queen h4 is the only logical move to play, but we would have to check it. Queen h4. Okay, so let's see what happens if they decline. King to g7. We could trade queens. E takes d4. We get our king into the game. And even if they play king to f6, we can wander our king to f4, then to e4. And once we get to the magic square e4, d4 will fall. So that looks really good for white. So therefore, we would look at queen h4, queen takes. Now, obviously, we want to take with our king so that we don't mangle our pawns and lose a lot of tempi. Black there has a couple of moves, but white still has the plan of migrating over to e4 and on to d5. So even if they play king h4, g5 check, king to g4, king g6, king f3, threatening king to e4, and if king f5, then g4 check, and then white gets their dream of getting the king to the e4 square. So that all looks fairly good. So I'm going to actually go with that as the solution. Let's see. Be there, be there, be there. It is correct. Okay, so obviously we take with the king. Oh, and that was it. Wow. Okay, so just a lot of analysis, and they didn't even make me prove that. Okay, so we move on to this next one. Okay, checks. Well, we got B2, A1, and B3. All three of those look useless. Captures. Well, okay, so we've got a check and a capture. We could take D3. Both of those are useless. So therefore, we are looking for threats. Okay, so the first thing that can easily be noticed is bishop to a3, which makes two threats, as a matter of fact. One is to take the rook, the other is checkmate. However, bishop to a3, pawn c3 looks like it defends both. So that might not necessarily, even though that looks good, that might not necessarily be the answer. Let's see. The queen is a little bit too far into the position, but not all these squares can be guarded. So I don't think we go after the queen here. Let's see. So so the problem with bishop to a3 is that pawn comes to c3, which not only hits the queen, but it will give white room to make rook c2 and guard the rook from the bishop attack. All right, so perhaps we should take a look at actually blocking that threat first, even though it looks like that. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we actually have up a pawn, but down an exchange. But white has also got a trapped rook here. So if we block that threat with queen to c3, threatening bishop to a3, can white actually get out of that threat of bishop a3? So queen c3, I mean, even d5 falls, but then bishop to a3, and then checkmate would be pretty much forced. So queen c3 is looking really, really good as a threat. So it's basically a threat to threaten a threat. We're threatening to threaten here. And white is so clogged up here that perhaps bishop a3 can't. Okay, so there's no counterattack on the rook. There's no counterattack on the king. Let's see, queen c3, pawn d4, still bishop a3. The idea with d4 was to try to get in rook to d3, but black's bishop move is way too quick. So I think it's queen c3 first. Let's see, yeah, because let me check one more way. Bishop a3, c3, queen f2, threatening h2, and this and the rook, but then white can play rook c2, and that defends everything. So I'm going to go with queen c3. Come on, be there, be there, be there. Yes, okay. And then look at that. It was so strong that he even sacked his queen. So we just simply take the queen. I don't think we have anything better, and that's that. Okay, so then we move on. All right. So here we have an end game, opposite colored bishops. We're down a pawn, and white is threatening to queen, and yet we're the one with the tactic. So that's always good. That's kind of a funny thing about these chess problems, is that a lot of times if you just look at the position from a material point of view, we might actually be given a material less position quite a bit, but have tactical opportunities. Okay, so we notice here that we can stop the pawn by giving bishop g5 check, which threatens the king, stops the pawn. We also notice that okay, actually that's funny, because looking at the possibility of letting the pawn queen and then giving the check, but of course when the check happens, it will be check on the king, so we don't have time to play something like e4 first when this is check. Okay, so that means that our first move is in fact forced, but then we will have to find a win on the next move. So let's play the only move that we have, which is check. So here is the point to the puzzle. Now, obviously, we're not going to give another check. This is probably just going to make the king become better. So we do have checks, but both of them look useless. We don't have any captures. So now it comes down to threats. Well, obviously we cannot make a threat with this, or the king. So therefore that leaves the e-pawn. So the e-pawn can run up the board, make a threat, possibly keep running up the board, making bigger threats as it goes. And I don't see anything else that black has. So let's just play go pawn go. Okay, king to bishop to d1. Bishop's getting almost trapped here. If king to d2, bishop b3, and they escape. So I would assume that we would push the pawn. Okay, but let's see, push the pawn, king f3. That doesn't look wonderful. We can actually make another threat first, however. We can threaten the bishop, actually force him to go to b3, and then play go pawn go. That looks a lot better. And now the king will be helping and the pawn will get shepherded. So I think we throw the king in first. Let's go. Let's be there. Success. All right. And now we move on. Okay, here we go. Find best move for black. Here we have equal material, same color bishops. Both kings look rather precarious. White has just played queen g5, obviously threatening some sort of invasion with queen to e7 or queen to e5. But it's our turn, so we get to do something first. Okay, checks captures threats. There's a check on e4 that's worth considering. We can exchange rooks with a check, so that's a capture and a check. We have queen a5 check, and that's it. That's it as far as those go. Okay, so e4 is out, obviously. Although, wait a minute, a rook to e4 does have the discovery that the queen now has to g1. So maybe rook e4 is not worthless. Let's see, rook to e4, bishop takes rook, queen g1 check, king d2 only move. And then it looks like the king is going to make it to c1, and that should be safe. So even though this allows the queen in, we probably don't have enough to give up the rook for it, but it does give us an idea that moving the rook does allow for queen to g1. So now rook to d1 does make sense. Rook takes d1, king takes d1. Let's execute queen to g1, and that looks like a fork on the king and the bishop, and that looks like it wins the bishop, and it wins it with checks so that we will have time to bring our queen back and defend our own king, which is slightly exposed. And I don't think there's anything better. Queen a5 check. Queen a5 check, rook b2. Possibly. That's interesting. So queen a5 check also. Yeah, king f2, rook takes d1. And if rook d2, everything's pinned. Doesn't look like that we can increase the threats. So I'm not going to go for the king. I'm going for the bishop here. So I'm going to exchange rooks. Come on, be there. It is. Okay, so this must be met by queen g1 check. And that was that. Okay, good. All right. All right. So, wow, we have a weird knight on a8 here. Let's see. So what's material? 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. So material is equal. Again, both kings look rather precarious. Bishop is hanging. Knight is on a8. King is badly placed on a7. This one's pinned. So it looks like that we're the ones that have a messy position here. All right, but it is our turn. Okay, so at the very least, we could trade queens. That would lessen the attack, but that's not the point to the puzzle. Let's see, we could capture a bishop and make this knight go over to a3, which might be okay. We also have a loose piece here. So, okay. So, but of course we should look now. Actually, you see what I did there, guys, is I actually started looking at the captures first, not the checks. So here we have check, 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 and check. And all of those look totally insane. So we can ignore those. So I went to captures immediately. And that's, by the way, that is something, once you get in the habit in your own games, which, by the way, this is what this puzzle practice is all about, is that when you're playing in your own games, that you, especially when it's your turn and your clock has been pressed and, it's your turn to make a move, you should always look at your, I shouldn't say you should, that's bad. I would recommend looking at your checks, your captures, and your threats first before you decide upon a move. If you find a good check or a good capture or a good threat or a combination of 2 or 3 of those things, then that would be the best move and probably give you a winning position if you can play such a move. Now, actually, what I did here is since I noticed that very quickly that the checks were worthless, I immediately went to captures, but I should go through each step one at a time. Okay, so now that we notice the hanging knight on b3, we would notice that if we take this right away, then white, of course, will take the hanging bishop on d6. So therefore, this tactic must be the in-between move, where instead of playing our good move that we have, we flick in a move first, exchanging bishops, and then when they capture, then we take. And that should win a piece, even though our king still looks a bit drafty, but we will have an extra piece there. We also notice another tactic after bishop takes a3, and if white exchanges queens first, that we have rook takes, which will then perform the skewer tactic once white captures back, and then the knights will be skewered on b3 and a3. I don't see anything else. This would be nice, but it's too well defended. So we'll go for the in-between move skewer here. So be there. Yes. Okay. And then here we can just simply capture the knight. I don't think our queen gets trapped there. So let's just take our knight, and that wins. All right. Moving on here. Okay, another queen ending. This one, we're down 3 pawns, so we have to have something very special here in order to make this work. Okay, so checks. We have a check here, check G7, G5, A1, and then we have a check capture and threat on E3. Of course, that is just met by queen takes E3, but it is nice to notice these things because, we might try to set something like that up in a slightly different position. Okay, so of the checks, G7 looks the most enticing because black does not have too many places to go. If f5, then queen h7 is a skewer. If e4, then queen g6 is also a skewer, and it's somewhat of a distraction because the king will have to be distracted away. But I guess that is technically a skewer. So yeah, queen e4, queen g6, queen f5, queen h7. If we check on g7, the only other move is queen f4, and then after queen to g5, that forces him back to e4, and then we get the qg6 skewer. There is no other move. So I think we just solved that one really, really quickly. Let's do it. Check. And then on this one, my idea was to check on G5. Let's check the analysis there. Let's see, queen F6, queen F5, check. Okay, so yeah, so we go here to force him and then here to skewer him. There we go, and that was it. All right. So here's a position where we look like we have a terrible position. Black is fully developed, coordinated. Looks like just one material here. White's king is a mess. I guess the only good thing is that there's a couple of pieces aimed towards the king. Even the queen is aimed towards the king. So I guess that is what is going for white here. White also has skewer potential on e4, but we have to do something about the queen. Okay, so, and black's last move was c takes d4. Now, by the way, sometimes it is good to go through the last couple of moves to see what was happening before we got to the puzzle. Some players might like to go all the way back to the beginning and play through the moves and see what was going on. One thing that, well, actually, we'll save that for another one. But anyway, so these were the moves that were played. We'll just skip all the way to the puzzle portion. All right. Okay, checks, captures, threats. So all of our checks are sacrifices here. So we have a sacrifice here and a sacrifice here. Rook takes g7 is interesting because if the king refuses, then queen h7 should win, or I'm sorry, rook takes h7 should be a rather quick win. Black will then be probably checkmated, yeah? Let's see, rook g7, king h8, rook h7, king g8, queen g1, and the king will be trapped. The only thing he could do is play bishop g3. Okay, so you can't refuse. So that's always good right off the bat. So when looking at one line, rook takes g7, if they refuse this sacrifice, that's an immediate mate. So what happens if they accept? King takes g7. Now we do notice we have queen h6, and there, if king to h8, queen h7 is mate. If king g8, queen h7 is mate. If queen f7, then queen h7 is not mate, but on king to e8, we then have bishop g6, which does lead to mate. So I think we just found it just simply using checks and captures, by the way. We simply check and capture on g7, we check on h6, we check and capture on h7, we check on g6, and that should be mate. So let's see if that's the correct answer. Be there, be there, be there. Yes, 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 and yes, and he's got a block with the rook, and we take with the queen, and mate. Very good. Okay, so now let's move on. All right, let's see, 3-3. So we're down a let's see, knight for knight, bishop to bishop. So 2 pieces for a rook. We have. And let's see, and we have an extra pawn. All right, so now I guess the main feature here is that white is attacking the queen, but our queen is being attacked. So this means that we must probably employ the desperado tactic. We do something very wise with our queen so that we can maybe have time to play rook takes queen. Okay, so checks, captures, threats. The only check we have is queen b3, so that does do something with the queen. However, we would assume bishop to e6. Okay, however, let's see, just continuing on that line, queen b3, bishop to e6. If we then take the queen and they capture our queen, we could easily trade rooks first. They capture back bishop or king, and then we can actually take the bishop on b3, which should give us, is that decisive material advantage? Let's see, queen b3, bishop e6. We take a queen, they take a queen. We take a rook, they take a rook. We take a bishop. We would have knight for knight, bishop for bishop, knight for rook. So we'd be up in exchange. I mean, that seems okay, but maybe we have something better than that. So we'll keep that one in mind. Let's see. So captures, we can capture on e5, just sort of ignoring this, but then we would have to take the queen. But then they could take our rook. That doesn't look so wonderful. Let's see. And moving our queen somewhere weird like a5 or a3 That doesn't really, the only threat it makes is to the queen. So they could just move, they could just go to e8 or something and just run away, or even play this knight to c6 and block the attack. So it must be queen b3. So this wins. I guess it will end up being an exchange ahead in an end game, which I guess is going to be good enough to win. So let's see if that's it. Be there, be there, be there. It's right. Okay, so we're still on the queen. We still have a check on e6, but that's bad. So my guess was just to simply grab the queen, trade down, win the bishop. So let's be there. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so that's check. So let's take back. And we have an exchange up endgame and wins. All right. So let's see this position here, equal material. White's king is open, but black's king is trapped somewhat, especially by this pawn on f6. So checks captures threats. We do have queen h5 or queen h7, king h7, rook h5, king g8, but there doesn't look to be any follow up there. We can't even use the knight; it's pinned, so we can't. This knight will not be a part of the combination. So okay, so we don't. So we had a good check and a capture. We don't have a capture here. We have a capture here, which is lame, and nothing else. So that means again we're looking at threats. Okay, so the first threat, of course, that can be noticed is queen h6, which threatens queen g7 mate. However, if rook to g8, that does set up disco possibilities on the king. However, queen h6, rook g8, queen takes h7, king takes h7, rook h5 is checkmate since the rook is standing here. So that might actually be the solution right away. Also, if queen to h6, black can capture the, well, but okay, so no, that doesn't work. Just simply capture back. Black does stave off mate, but it costs him a rook to do that, so that's not good. And then the only other one I was noticing is the move rook h5, threatening this one, but then I suppose knight f8 could be played. And black has constructed some sort of defense. So my guess it is queen h6 making the big threat here, and if they block it with the rook, they just walked into another mate. What do they call that? The dovetail mate. King takes, followed by rook h5, and that's checkmate. So let's try for that. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. Okay, and so here he gives up the rook, and and the queen. Okay, well, whatever. Give it all up then. Fine. All right, so we move on. So here we're down 2 pieces, but obviously here the biggest factor is that the black king is way out in outer space, which usually gets past any material factors, especially if you have enough pieces to make checkmate with or to win heavy duty material. Okay, so we've got a huge number of checks here. We got queen e7, we got queen b6, queen takes c6, queen b5, queen b4, queen a7, pawn b4, rook takes d5, which is a check and a capture. And so is this. So all of those look really bad. B4 would be excellent in different conditions, but there's just way too much over there. All these other checks are worthless. So then moving on to captures. So here we had a capture check. Now the thing about this check is that it does skewer the queen. However, after king takes, that pins the knight. So therefore, if we play rook takes d5, king takes d5, rook to e5 check, that also skewers the queen, but the knight won't be able to take the rook because it's pinned. Now, the only thing about that is that if the king moves out of the skewer and we take the queen and they capture back, black then has 2 rooks and a knight for a queen. Even though the king is out there in outer space, it might be possible to win the queen, win the knight with the queen. Like for example, rook takes d5, king takes d5, rook e5 check, king to d6, rook takes queen, knight takes queen, queen b4 check, wins the knight, but then it gets into an ending queen versus 2 rooks. Now, probably what can be supposed is that since white is up 3 pawns, that white will have the better of that end game, queen versus two rooks, even though the two rooks are coordinated. I mean, they're connected. They're not coordinated though, and they're not attacking. However, that ending is probably winning. So, and I don't see any other tactics. So let's just go for that. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. Let's play this one. Yes. Let's take this one. And let's not queen b6 because the knight can come back, but queen b4 was the idea here. And that was correct. Okay, good. And then we move on. Ooh, a rook and pawn end game. So here we've got a rook and pawn end game. Pawns are on the same side. White's in the train station, and really has no other problems. And yet somehow we're the ones with the tactic here. All right, so checks captures threats. Okay, so we have a check here. Both of those are useless. Capture, we have none. So again, we're reduced to threats. So, I mean, the king and the rook are lined up, but there is no skewer potential. We would need the rook somewhere over here. And the tempo to play rook to f4, but that is, I mean, that, that's not happening. So the only thing that is worth threatening is the H pawn. So let's see, threatening it with the king is possible, threatening it with the rook is possible. I would say of those two, threatening with the rook seems better because if king to h4, there is rook a3, is simply holding on to it. So this prevents this and then hits the pawn. I don't see really anything else. If white tries a counterattack, rook takes h3 actually defends the counterattack thing. It also wins the g pawn too. So then you get a rook and pawn, a rook ending with two extra pawns. So let's see, rook c3, rook a5 check. All we have to do is move the king there, I think, and the pawn is going to fall. So I don't see anything better than that. So let's go for that. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. Okay, so I guess this is a nice little puzzle here. What's the best way to get out of check? Let's see. King h4. My guess he could play rook a7, and then this attack is on. So maybe not that. If king f6, there is the possibility of g5 check, and that will make the black king a little uncomfortable there, not being able to escape. And this rook will be able to give a large series of checks. So perhaps the answer here is king h6. King h6, and even if g5 check, you could play king to h5. But then rook a7 again. Okay, this is a tough one. Maybe this is a time to use the skip. So there's three moves here, but one of them is more precise than another. Let's see. So king f6. King f6 looks like the worst one. So this, I don't think, because after g5 check, the black king looks really stranded there and is subject to many, many checks. So I think it's just down to these two. So let's see, king h6. I think we have the same problem. g5 check, king to h5, rook a7. And that doesn't, I don't know, that doesn't look so wonderful. King h4, rook a7. King takes pawn, rook takes check, king takes g4. Is that really a winning ending? The king is somewhat cut off for the moment. And we'll have king pawn and rook versus rook. And the king does not have any ability to get in front of the pawn. That might be winning for black. King h4, rook here. king take pawn, rook take pawn, king take pawn. Then there's also king here, rook a7. There's also h6. Is that something? No. No. That's too trapping. So yeah, this and this look a little too much like white gets counterplay of some kind. So I think king h4 might be, and just simply collect both pawns and go into the single extra pawn endgame here. Okay, let's see if that's correct. Here, let's hope it's be there. Come on, it is. Oh, and it was. Oh, and they didn't make me prove it. Wow. Woo! And I didn't have to use my skip either. All right, that's cool. Okay, so this position we are down in a full piece here. Not only that, it looks like black's got a few. I mean, black, okay, it has this bad rook over here on h8. Everything else looks like it's in reasonable positions here, but it is our move. So, okay, so we have a check on e8. That looks insane. We have a check on f7, which almost looks good, but not really. So, okay, so we don't have a good check. Capture, we can take on h6. We could take on f6. And that is it. And both of those look not so good. So this means threats. Okay, so the biggest threat that can be made is queen c4 looks threatening mate. Let's see, knight can't move to defend it. Rooks can't move to defend it. Queen can't defend it. Knight could put in the way. However, that pins so there's another tactic. So we've got a double attack on f7, and we have a pin on the c file. So that's a very tactical move, queen c4. We also, there is d7 going for the tactic of promotion. But that probably doesn't look so good because it undefends the rook. So the only threat that I see that has any oomph to it is queen to c4, and black's going to have to give up something to survive this. So I think I'm going to go for that. Be there. Yes. Oh, check. Oh, geez, I didn't even see that. Whoops. Well, wait a minute. That was the correct move, though. Okay, so because we're still alive. All right, so there's a disco and a check. And so we have to take away our mate. Let's see if we take with the rook takes queen. Is there no back rank problems? So let's just pick up the knight. Now, wait a minute. We were down a knight in this position. So all we're doing is winning our knight back. Wait a minute. Let's think about this. Rook takes d3, rook takes queen. Do we have anything special there? No. Rook b7. No, queen g1. Okay, yeah. Okay, so we just pick up our knight. And that's it. Okay. So the point to that puzzle was to get our piece back and just get an overwhelming position with the bad rook on h8. Interesting puzzle. Okay, so here is one puzzle that looks straight out of the opening. A lot of times with these, I actually do like to go all the way back to see what opening this was. So it looks like it's a Smith-Morra gambit in a Sicilian. H6 with A6 and B5. I don't know of this defense. Okay, this and this looks familiar. Invading, take. G3 to keep the knight off of F4. Queen F6, rook to E1, rook D8. So rook D8 is the move that allows white to make a combination. This one's a little bit easier to go through. No check, so we go right to captures. There's rook takes E6. There's bishop takes E6. There's rook takes C6. And there's rook takes d7. There's queen takes b5. There's knight takes b5. So probably it's not a positional sacrifice of a knight on a pawn. That, it's probably not the point to the puzzle. So it doesn't look like this is a capture. So again, we're in threat territory here. let's see, what kind of threats can we make here? One thing that rook d8 did is it did take away the retreat to the queen. So if we attack the queen, does she have a lot of places to go to? Let's see. So, I mean, if we play a move like e5, that would allow queen f5, and then the queen has a variety of light squares to use. So it's probably not hitting the queen with the pawn. This would allow some sort of retreat. Oh, but we have the tactic of pin. Okay, I get it now. So this way we do have the resource knight to d5. The queen can't take on b2 because it's defended. The pawn can't take because of rook. Although black could probably think about sacrificing the queen for the rook and the knight. Although that's probably winning for white anyway, but I guess it's still possible. Knight to d5 also takes away the queen e7 retreat. And once this attacks the queen, you can't go to e5, g5, h4, f5 here or take because everything is defended. So I think we make the threat of knight to d5. Come on. Yes. And here we just take the queen and that's it. All right. Good. So we're making some good progress here. Okay, here we're down a ton of material. So we have to have something really good, such as checkmate or, the win of the queen or something like that. So here we have queen a1, queen b1. We have ab as the checks. Of those, ab looks, of course, the most logical. So ab check, king b3, and the king looks rather drafty out there. Black's king is actually quite safe here, so there is not going to be any counter checks by white. So we do have time to make a move there. So A, B, king B3, something like, oh, I see it. No, this one's very nice. Okay, so I see it. So it's A, B, king to b3, and then again, using the checks capture threat method, we find rook a3 check, which skewers the queen. And if b takes a, then queen b1 is actually checkmate. The king won't be able to go to a3 or a2 or a4 because of the b pawn. You can't take because of the queen. You can't go to c4 because of this, and you can't go to c3 because there's a pawn sitting here. Okay, so that's very, very nifty. So let's check him. And then on this one, we just simply take the queen. And that's that. Very nice. All right. So let's see here. This looks like a King's Indian defense. Although this bishop is way over here. Actually, let's check this opening. Okay, no, it wasn't a King's Indian. Oh, it was a Schliemann Lopez. So very, very aggressive. White castled queen side and played for the king side attack. So both sides were launching at each other. So white's last move was knight to d7, which does hit a rook. It also goes for f6. Okay, so, but we're the one with the move. So checks, we have none. Captures, we have one here, one here, one here. All those look somewhat unimportant. So I don't think it's a check. It's not a capture, so it's a threat. So the one thing that I see is that the knight has ventured a little too far in the position. A good general rule with knights is that if your knight is on the 7th or the 8th rank, and usually the only reason why you would go to the 8th rank with a knight normally is because you captured something. You took a rook, you took a bishop, whatever, and that's why your knight's sitting there on the back rank. There are times, of course, in endgames where using the back rank is necessary for a knight because you need to reposition it, more closer to the center, but you have to use a back rank square or a 7th rank square to achieve this. But here, I think the knight possibly has gone too far. So this might be a case where we actually make a threat, but it is not a threat against the king. It is actually a backwards move, which Lichess is awfully fond of with the puzzles, are retreating moves that attack stuff. So here we notice the move bishop c8, making a pin. That's the tactic. And winning going for the knight, although white would have DC there. So that's an interesting in between move. Bishop c8, d takes c, bishop takes, pawn takes, bishop takes hits the rook, rook hits the bishop, but bishop f3 hits the rook. That looks like it wins a piece. And with a long series of in-between moves, I think we actually get to save this piece. Yeah, I don't think we have time to like save the rook. And then, by the way, if bishop c8 and knight f6 check, you can actually play rook takes f6 since you have a disco on the queen. So I'm going to go for that one. Let's see if that's the answer here. Be there, be there, be there. Correct. And he does, in fact, take. So my idea was to take this with the bishop. So that way, if the queen runs somewhere, then we could play bishop takes, and that still wins us a piece. So let's play it. Yay! All right. Whoa. Okay. So here's a position. Wow, this looks wild. Okay, so we're down a rook. Both kings are uncastleable, which is good. But looks like both sides are attacking somewhat. All right, so checks captures threats. So we have a check on d4. We have a check on d6. And that is it as far as checks go. So either one of those checks looks like it's just met by bishop to d3. So whether we check here or here doesn't matter, just play bishop d3. And that also defends the bishop, which is currently under attack. So we look at captures. We have queen takes bishop, which is interesting because it also threatens queen takes rook, followed by queen takes rook. And there is no corresponding counterattack here, so that already looks good. Let's see. Other captures. Actually, that's the only thing we can take is c4. And then we look at threats. Well, let's see. Can't threaten the queen. Can't threaten the rook. Threatening the knight is far. We're miles away from attacking this knight. So my guess is that we just simply take the bishop, ask the rook what he wants to do, and then without that bishop d3 resource, the queen d4 check is going to be a lot more forceful. Although, let's see, queen takes c4, rook takes f2. We don't necessarily, well, let's see, rook takes f2, queen h8 check. And then our king gets harassed a little bit. But his king is wide open too. Okay, so I don't really see any other thing that can happen there. So I'm going to go for it. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. And he tries to threaten the rook with mate, incidentally. So that's the point. So if queen takes rook, king to d2 not only hits the queen, but threatens mate. Haha. Very, very clever. Okay. Let's see. So we don't necessarily have to take the rook with check. We could check him here. But then queen d2. Okay, so we can't check him here. So let's see. Check. King d2. And what do we have there that's so special? Queen f1, king d2, and then what? Bishop e3 check, defending the rook. That seems kind of unnecessary. Yeah, we would like to play a move like d5 to get time to play bg4 check and bring the light bishop into the action, but that's not going to do it. Let's see. Check here, bishop e1, rook to e1. Rook f2. That's interesting. And that wins the rook. So queen f1, king d2, bishop e1 check, which incidentally defends the rook. And if rook takes, then rook f2. And wherever the king goes, black will be able to pick up the rook with check. So I think that's the answer. So check. Oh, and again, didn't make me prove it. That would actually be nice. Get some actual proof out of it. But okay, so if you get the win, you get the win. All right, so let's move on. Here we have, let's see, we have, we're down in exchange. Got some bad looking pawns. We have good center control. And both white's king looks draftier than black's. And we have some sort of winning position here. So check. So we got queen h2 check, queen g3 check, queen g5 check, which is also a capture. Those are both all insane. We have a capture here, which is terrible. Wow. And not only that, but our knight, which is defending our bishop, is under attack. So this hopefully obviously black's got something really good here. Let's see. There's also knight g5, which does remove the attack. It also threatens a couple of things, but white can remove this guy. Let's see. Knight to g5, bishop to g5, queen to g5. If king f1, then bishop h3 is mate. If king h2, then well, what would be the point there? Knight takes g5, bishop takes g5, queen takes g5, king h2. I don't see it. Okay, so well, wait a minute. Knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes. And if king h1, then bishop takes h3. And if king h2, then maybe queen h4 and h3 falls. But white could presumably sack the exchange back, and that would seriously hamper that attack. Okay, so let's start looking at threats here. Let's see. There's knight f4, threatening the queen. There's knight d4, same thing. And I guess that's it in the threat department. Okay, so this looks like it's going to be a difficult one. All right. Well, obviously moving this knight is not the answer. That will drop the rook. There is no queen move that we can make to do anything useful. Maybe the only one is queen f5 going after the h3 pawn, but I don't think we have enough firepower for that. And this bishop is a really good defender, especially against this knight, which would be a great piece if this bishop weren't there. But that's, can't have everything. So moving the knight's no good. Moving the rook, which would be awesome. We don't have time for that. Moving this knight looks like it does nothing. And moving this bishop, we can't do anything useful. So to me, it looks like that knight takes g5 is the only move. It's the only move that gets rid of white's threats and also sets up threats, although white and white will be forced to give up the bishop, but they will give it up for this really good knight on e6. But what we get after that is the hard part. Well, okay, so I guess we just do this one move at a time. Let's go for that. Be there, be there, be there. It is correct. Whoa, and he's sacked right away. I was not expecting that. I was expecting this. Okay, well, now we have in-between move powers. We can take the rook, but we can do something with the knight first. I guess this is what? I guess it's an in-between move, but it's also a desperado. We have knight f3 check, which forks these two guys. We could take a pawn with check, and make his king uncomfortable. This is a difficult one. Let's see. So let's see. Knight takes h3. White actually can go pretty much to any of these. Could probably even just go to g2. So that looks bad. So knight here would be better. So if queen captures, we can capture back and win the queen. If knight f3, king h1, he's mated. King g2, it's going to lead to mate. And on f1, f1, we still might have queen h2. And queen g1 looks awfully hard to stop, in addition to attacking his rook. So let's do that as an in-between move. Be there, be there. Yes. All right. Okay, so let's move on. Got an end game here. 2 bishops versus bishop and knight. That looks wonderful. Let's see. Got 4 pawns on a file. That's wonderful. Okay, so but we've got some sort of tactical situation here. Okay, so we've got 1 check. And even in the end game, the insane checks ought to be looked at, because sometimes the insane checks create some sort of passed pawn. Here, this does not seem to be the case. So bishop to d3 is the only check, and white, of course, will just take. So not that. Captures, let's see, we could take c2, knight takes, and that's the end of that story. Bishop takes first can happen. C takes B, and then bishop takes C2, which does in fact win a pawn, but it gets into an opposite color bishop endgame that's probably will be hard to win. So those are the captures, and then so let's look at threats. Okay, this knight I notice is trapped somewhat. It does have 2 squares that it can go to, but the others are taken up. So maybe this is what we can threaten. This guy is hard to threaten. The king is hard to checkmate. Right, and white is also threatening knight takes c6. So because this bishop is on a7 as well, the move king d7 comes to mind, with the threat of a5 actually winning the knight. Let's see, king to b7. Can move the a pawn. So let's say a4. Not a3, because after a5, knight a2, bishop takes a3, clips a pretty clear pawn and gives black a passer. So that couldn't be good. So king b7, pawn a4, pawn a5, knight a2, bishop takes c2, and then the a4 pawn falls. So there black picks up 2 pawns and picks up a passed a pawn. That looks really, really good. I don't see anything else. If we try to threaten him with c5, then just simply knight a6 and take c5. Or actually even worse, knight c6 and take e7. So he can't even threaten him like that. So I'm going to play king to b7. Come on, be there, be there. Yes. And he just gives away the knight for free. So that was that. This one looks like an easier one. So this is, and again, using checks, captures, and threats, we get to it really easily. Now here we got to check on g3, check on e6, check on h5, check on e5, check on d4. Now of these, there looks like one really good. Now knight e6 looks really good. Check, and then picking up the knight, unfortunately, it gets mated by queen to b1. So we want to actually play knight takes e6, but this is a fork plus an in-between move. So it's an in-between a fork. And the way that we do this is we actually we do a check and a capture by going queen takes, and this will eliminate the back rank mate problem, and then capture like this, and we end up with an extra piece, but we don't get mated. So that's pretty standard stuff. Okay, so here we're playing white. That's also important too, especially when endgame puzzles come up. You might think you're playing the black pieces and you're going this way, but you're actually white and you're going this way. So it's always good to pay attention. And by the way, the easiest way to do that is always look at the board. The lead chess puzzles are always set up correctly from your point of view. So if you're playing black, it will have the, H, G, F, E, D, and so on. When it's white, it'll be as it is shown here. Okay, so rook and pawn endgame, down one pawn, but we've got a passer, and it's on the 7th rank. Black also has a passer, but it's on the 6th, so it's one move behind. Okay, so checks, captures, threats. So we got to check on C3, check on F6. Check on C3 looks completely stupid. Rook on F6 looks okay, though, because after king to G2, white could play the interference tactic, rook to F8, which will lead to the promotion tactic, G8. I don't think we have to look any further than that. I don't see, we're not getting mated over here, even though our king is badly placed. There's no mate. Even if the rook could get to A3, there's no mate, so we're not in any danger. We don't have any captures to speak of. And the only threat that we really have is the pawn promoting. So putting the rook on F8 will solve all our problems. Check. Up. Here. Okay. So he did not go to G. I was anticipating this to support the pawn, but that, of course, allows promotion with check. Okay, so this is kind of a tough part. So, of course, here, if we promote, black will have the in-between move, rook takes rook, and then when queen takes rook, queening, and then the game is unclear. But here, if we queen first, okay, so yeah, that's if we queen first. So here, if we capture first, and then they queen, and then we queen, we end up with a rook ahead. Now, our king isn't overly wonderful, but I guess the king can still go to B5 there. So yeah, queen D1, king B5, queen D7. The king can also start taking pawns too. In fact, that's even more accurate. Queen D1, king takes A5 after they promote. So let's capture the rook first, please. Yes. All right. Okay, let's move on. Okay, rook and pawn endgame, down a pawn. Let's see, we have only one check, which is G4. That just encourages the king to get closer to where he wants to go. So that doesn't look great. So the check doesn't work. So captures. We've got rook takes G7. We have H takes G7. HG actually has a threat of promotion. Rook takes does not. We're not threatening to promote. You're only threatening the rook. So if rook takes and the rook moves somewhere, say A8, and then the rook can come over and blockade, and maybe black's got good chances there. So I would imagine that rook takes is not correct. So pawn takes threatens to promote. And there, if rook to A8, then you've got rook H8, which forces promotion. Even if black starts doing an avalanche of checks, white can always just hide out on H2. So HG looks perfectly good. And there is the only other one is this is a capture threat. But like I said, then they'll just simply back up to A8 and come over to H8. So I'm going to take this with the pawn. Be there. Yes. And then we win the rook. Good. Okay. So king and pawn endgame 5-5. Okay. So here we have no checks. We've got one capture. Threat. We can grab opposition, which is in the endgame a really good threat. So here, if we're going to go for here we might actually have to combine captures and threats. So capturing first will force this. Then grabbing the opposition gives black a very unpleasant choice. Do you sacrifice a pawn? Do you move to the king side and let white go to the queen side? Come over here, start chomping things and promote the A pawn? Or do you go to the queen side and let white come over here, chomp the Harry and promote his Harry? So let's see, take, king e4, king f6. Actually, yeah, we probably don't want to go to king e4, king f6. We probably don't want to go to d5 right away because of king f5. And then it becomes a race. Black's going to come over here and chomp and push. White's going to come over here and chomp, chomp, and push. But I think White's way too slow there. So let's see. So take, opposition, king f6, opposition again. And if king g6, then the king to e5. And now we're really pushing them around. Probably the winning procedure is just to push black away from the h pawn, take that pawn, and then walk back over and start chomping these guys and let black come over and take. So let's go for that. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. Opposition. Yes. Simple and good. There it is. All right. Here we have equal material. Looks like white has some preponderance of force on the king side a little bit. But it is our move. Okay, so let's see. Check on E1, check on C1, check on A1. Okay, let's see. E1 looks the most dangerous. E1, H2. No, then all of a sudden we have to deal with getting mated here. So I guess if we're going to check, maybe A1 is better since we at least keep a hold of G7, but pushing the king to H. Oh, no, that's the interesting point. It was that is trying to get the king to H2 and then try to play knight takes F2, which will threaten queen H1. It threatens knight takes G4. And the king is starting to get, and the queen will still, like I said, be holding on to G7. So that's interesting. Queen A1, king H2, knight takes F2, winning a pawn. And putting the king in some danger, depending on where the queen goes. So let's see. Let's look at captures here. Before that. So yeah, this capture is bad because we get mated. This capture is bad because he just takes. So we don't have any captures and threats. Actually, everything he has except for Al the A pawn is defended. This is even defending here. So, and we don't have any, I don't think, like retreating, I don't think does anything. No, because we just get mated. So it looks to me like the only thing that we could really do is play queen A1 followed by knight F2 followed by queen H1 and bother the king. Yeah, let's see. We also might have some distraction potential with the pawn H5. Okay. Well, yeah, this one seems less clear, but I'm going to go for queen A1 and then knight takes F2. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. And I don't think I have anything better than this. Okay, so my idea was queen H1, king G3, and then back again to E4 with check. Do we have anything better than that? Queen H1, knight G4 check, and then the king has to start climbing out into outer space, which is going to cause him some problems, I would say. This knight is now hanging. Can we take advantage of that? Queen. No, because this knight's hanging too. Okay, so let's try out our idea. Come on, be there. Yes. Yes, indeed. And then I wanted to come back again and drag this king out. Although this doesn't look, this doesn't look like clearly winning, but that was it. That was the answer. So yeah, I don't know. That was hard. Black did win a pawn and white's king is drafty, but it would have been nice to see the rest of that. All right. Anyway, move on here. Okay, so here we are down a bunch of material. We're down a piece and 3 pawns, and our king is floating around in space. The only thing in our favor is that black has no development at all. barely. I mean, he does have a centralized queen and the knight, but nothing else. This bishop is causing him some problems. So the only check we have is rook takes f8. Well, yeah, that'd be great if knight to f8, because then you could play queen f7 checkmate, but he could take this with the rook. And that doesn't, of course, lead to anything special. Okay, so threats or captures. Let's see if we can take here, which does make room for queen f7 mate. But queen f5 check, it looks. I mean, this is probably a saving resource for black if the rook comes over, and this will just force the queens off the board. Okay, so we can't capture anything, and we can't capture this. So that means we again have to make a threat of some kind. So now we did figure out that moving this rook does, so it's a clearance move. We're looking for a clearance move that allows queen f7. Actually, I might have found it. What about rook to e4? This clears the rook, threatens mate. If queen f5 check there, then we can capture the queen, and now we have a different tactic, and that is pin. The pawn is pinned to the king. So that might actually be the answer. The answer might be rook e4. And if the queen let's see, I guess the queen can go to h5 to guard this. But then rook takes e6, that's right. And then he can't go here. He has to play rook e7, and then rook takes e7 is disastrous. That should win. Also, what's great about all that, I notice, is that when the queen's on h5, attacking the bishop is defended. So you could make discoveries with this bishop all you want since it's covered. So I'm going to go for that. Come on, be there. Let's see. Is there any way else he could guard e4? He could guard it with queen f6, I suppose, but then bishop takes. Okay, so let's be there, be there, be there. Yes. Oh, and he does play queen f6. So we just take and wins. Whew. We're up to 80. Okay. All right. So here we are down in an exchange. But our white's king is safe. Black's king is far from safe. So that's probably worth the material. Checks, captures, threats. We got rook g7 check. If king takes, then the knight's in a pin, but I don't think we get anything special out of that. We have queen b3 check. Now that one, if king to h8, rook h7 is mate, since this knight will be pinned by Mr. Bishop. If queen, if rook here, then queen here will lead to mate. If bishop there, that will lead to mate. If knight there on to d5, queen b3, knight d5, then rook g7 is now the windmill tactic. That ought to be devastating. If queen b3, queen d5, then same thing. Queen takes queen, knight takes queen, rook g7 is a windmill, which would lead to rook g7, king h8, rook h7, double check, king g8, rook h8 mate, since the knight and the bishop are covering everything. So he can't block like that. So queen b3, it looks like the only way he could block it is with the d pawn. And we're not getting mated there because knight to f1 will always guard the mate, although our bishop might be really important. So the only check that we have looks like it only has one move against it, which is d5. And that, I don't know, that looks sufficient. So maybe not a check. So let's look at captures here. So let's see, we could take on f6. And then rook takes f6. Rook takes e8, check. And if bishop takes, rook takes, bishop takes, wins a piece. Okay, I suppose that looks interesting. That, I mean, since like the first way, I mean, there's like 6 ways to go wrong, but 1 way to go right. This way, this looks like it wins material. This knight is hanging, though, if on a bishop move at some point. So like bishop takes, rook takes. Well, no, then rook takes is check. Huh. Okay. Well, I guess I don't see too much wrong with that. I would like to make queen b3 work, but I don't think it does. All right, so let's go for it. Bishop takes f6. Be there, be there, be there. Yes, take. Well, that was it. Okay, so here's one where we don't get to look at checks because we're in check ourselves. Okay, so obviously if we move our king anywhere, then they pick up our rook for free. So this one is very easy. We just simply capture. So the question here is, what's the best move? Okay, so it looks like that we should capture the pawn, but it is not actually threatening anything since our king is here. So the only move that, and we don't have any checks and we don't have any captures other than taking on d7, but we do have this threatening. We have Al over here, and Al, if he goes up to a5 and white goes up to f1 and we go to a4 and they go to e1 and we go to a3 and they go to d1 and we go to a2 and they go to c1, we score a touchdown long before that king will actually get to us. And of course, there is what is called the theory of the square, which means that once if the pawn goes to a5, then we will have 1, 2, 3, 4 squares to get to this place. So what we do is go 4 squares to the side, and by lining up all of these areas, we make a square. And so the idea is that if black goes to a5 and white can get into this square on this move with his king, you know, if the king could go to e1, that means that he will be able to catch this pawn before it gets to a1. So the king would have to be able to get to one of these squares. So here we don't take time out to take, we take time out to promote. Okay, now we have to take, of course. And then that's it. So, and the pawn will just score a touchdown. And there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, let's move on. So here we have a position where we're down a pawn. This king doesn't look very well placed, however. And we obviously have a tactic. So checks, we have none. So we can move on to captures. Here we only have one. Bishop takes, and if queen takes, that would hit the rook and the queen, and that would force a queen trade. And then we could bring the rook over with the skewer, but then they could trade off and then try to guard the d pawn. So that would go into a 4 rook endgame down a pawn. So taking doesn't look all that wonderful. Also, with bishop takes, he could also take with the bishop and just set up some more exchanges. So that should favor white. We do have this capture on d4, which is interesting because it does hit the queen, but this allows knight takes e7 check. And then afterwards, the queen can move. So that doesn't look so wonderful. So that means, so the captures don't look like, okay, so let's look at threats. Now it looks like that the only thing that we really can threaten with this position is rook to d7, which threatens to take the knight. If the knight moves away, then knight takes d4 is starting to look a little better. Also, rook to d7 makes room for queen h4, which is starting to set up some tactical shots on a bunch of weak pieces here. So my guess is that we make a threat. I don't think we have a good capture, but we could try to set up these captures by threatening them. I'm going to play rook to d7. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. Okay, well, this is stupid. We just take, and then we just take. Yes. Yes. Very good. Okay, and we move on. Okay, this position, we are down a piece, and it looks like we're being attacked. Lots of pieces over here doing stuff. We got two pieces that aren't doing things. We've got this guy that's really not doing anything, and neither is this rook, but this, and this make a nice little team. So, okay, let's look at what we have. So we got one check. What's interesting about this particular check is that the only move is knight takes f2. And then when we play rook to e1, that looks like checkmate right off the bat. So using this particular battery looks really, really strong. Queen takes, king h1, queen g1 is automatic checkmate. So this is very easy. We just take once, we check once, and that's mate. And that's game over. Okay, so here we're in another king and pawn endgame, and it looks like we've just exchanged rooks on g5. So the point is here's which capture back is better, f or h. Now, one thing I would say is that if you capture with the f pawn, this does give you the outside candidate pawn. This guy's not quite a passer, but if he can get to h5 and h4, he'll be on the outside, and the king will have to come over and go get him. If we capture with the h pawn and follow the rule of capturing towards the center, then we will get an inside candidate, which isn't nearly as strong because the king doesn't have to go so far to block Freddie as he does to go and block Harry. Nevertheless, I would say that, like, in general considerations, I would definitely want the outside pass pawn more than the inside one. Also, capturing with either pawn, if g4, then simply king to e5 followed by king to f4 followed by takes should give two pass pawns. I hope that's the answer. This might be one I see, and you know, and I should know these things. All right, let's do the outside pass pawn. Let's see. The only difference, though, is that if you keep the Freddie, then when this king advances, they won't be able to use the e5 square if you take this way. I don't know if that means anything. Now, let's go for the outside pass pawn. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. And then here I want to play h5, or do I want to get my king into the game first? King, king, king. King to e5, king. Oh, wow. Okay, so this is a tough one. Let's see. King, king. Then White might have this plan of walking up here, taking Charlie and promoting Delroy. I don't think we want to. So, like, going after Gary with the king, king f5, king g4, king takes might allow king f5, king e3, king g4, king d4, take, king here. Well, go, push, go, there, go, 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 queen, and we win. King f5, king f3, h5, g4. No, then black has this plan that where they can just like walk in. Well, this is interesting. King f5, king f3, h5, g4, hg check, king g3, maybe a5, lock these pawns up. Wow, okay. And then if king to e5, then probably just king e3, right? And then d4 check and start to make some progress on this side of the board. That just gives them too many tempi, and this brings the king not to a wonderful spot. So that just leaves h5 straight away and get that passed pawn as quick as possible. Drag the king over here and then try to go after these guys. Let's try that. Come on, be there, be there, be there. Yes, yes, yes. All right. Woo. Okay, so another king and pawn endgame. Here we don't have opposition, so what we need is opposition. So basically what we need is for it to be white to move, and they must move their king. So in order to do that, that means we need to lock these pawns up in the most efficient fashion. I would say f5 is not efficient because after g5, it is black who is has to forfeit the opposition, and white will always have a tempo move in the pawn h4. So that should be that won't be good right away. G5 is interesting because after f5, then h6, and then we get the tempo. And white will have to give up give up opposition, and black will be able to make progress and eventually eat the e3 pawn. So let's see, g5, and if white gives up the opposition right away, we could just play king to b3 and worm our way to d3. None of these pawns can move. If g5 takes, then you can simply capture back, and white will be without a move. And once they move their king, we get the opposition. So I think the answer is g5. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. And then I want opposition. Yes. All right. Okay, so this looks like a really simple one. So we've got removal of the guard tactic just by simply capturing, taking, but then queen takes c6 forks the king and rook. Okay, so I guess this has to be done delicately. All right, so let's see. We don't have any checks, but we have this capture. So take on e5, take on e5, take on d1, rook takes d1, and that just looks like an endgame where black's going to end up with a board full of bad pawns. So that can't be good. Like I said, capturing right away. Capture, we cannot take because of check. So this means that what if we do something with the rook first? So here we have threat territory. We do have rook d8, which is interesting because not only does it seize the open d file, but it makes it so that when we play for that combination, queen takes c6 will be checked, but it won't be forking the rook. The rook will be standing here on d8. So then we could just play king to f8 or something and save the rook and everything. So that looks the most promising. I don't see anything else there. So let's do that. Let's see. Rook d8. He can move out here, but then we have remove the guard, and then take on e5, which wins a piece. We will have to lose c6. We might even lose c6 and a6, but we do pick up the bishop. So let's try that. Be there, be there. Yes. So he does go for this one. Now this attacks the bishop and attacks c6, but this not only removes the guard of the bishop on e5, but it also guards the c6 pawn temporarily. And then we can take our free bishop. Yay. All right. 87. We're moving right along here. All right. So heavy piece endgame, down a pawn. We have the 7th rank, but so does white. Both sides queen are looking okay. Black's king looks a little safer than white's, and white's is temporarily on a really bad square here. So we have some checks. So we have c4 check. We've got h3 check. We got e2 and e1 check. Of those, h3 looks the most dangerous. But after king to g1, is there really anything special there? I mean, the king and the queen will be lined up, but I mean, white can, if white gets a free moment, they can always get out of all the problems with possibly queen to d8. So let's see, captures. Well, we could pick up a pawn. We could pick up a pawn. That looks meh. That looks like it gives up a lot of initiative. Okay, so then we have threats. So because this king is on f1, we actually have the, I don't know if this has a name for it, but the classic mate where if there's a queen, if there happened to be a queen on h1, it would be mate. And then there's like the one where, like if you play queen to e4, like queen e4, queen e2, and then this one leads to mate, that type of thing. I do notice that this move queen to e4 makes two threats. It makes the threat of rook b1, pinning the queen to the king, and the threat of mate. And that looks actually okay. So now, of course, we could be checked once on the back rank. Let's see, queen e4. It can't be checked with the rook because the rook falls. Oh, actually, that's not true. Oh, no, that is true. So queen e4 actually is looking really promising. We're threatening a mate. We're threatening a queen. If queen d8 check, we just simply play king to g7. The queen e4 will guard the second check. And then rook b1 is not just winning a queen, it will be mate, as is queen to h1. So this might be a case of we go after the king here. The white king looks really weak. I don't see really anything else, so let's go for that one. Be there, be there, be there. Yes, this is forced. Okay, so sack the rook. Let's see if we refuse it, then queen f8, and suddenly we're probably the one getting mated. So we should probably accept this gift. Yes. Okay, good. All right. So moving on here. Here again is another position where black is coordinated, but it looks like that we're under some small attack. I mean, it looks like that our king is way worse than theirs. But we're the one with some sort of tactics. So checks, captures, threats. Here we have no checks. We've got a capture on g4, which will allow queen takes h7. So I don't know about that. We have queen takes g4, which does not allow queen takes h7, but wins a pawn. There's also this possible tactic by white with bishop d5 check, especially with queen takes g4, bishop d5. Can't take because this will hang. That might be a resource for black if not paying attention here. Okay, so there's a capture here. There's also a capture on e3, an exchange sack, which also doesn't look that great. So probably not there. So I guess of the captures, only queen takes looks interesting. Queen takes, picking up a pawn, and if bishop d5, king h8, this is a really nasty pin. Huh. Okay, so we've run against a complicated one here. All right, let's see. Any other threats that we have? I guess queen a4 is something of a threat. Maybe queen b5 is another kind of threat, like going for some sort of sneaky disco on b2. That looks a little slow, though. Okay, so we got a complicated one here. All right, well, let's see. Yeah, like take on g4, queen takes g4, knight takes g4, massive pin on the bishop and a pig pile with all these pieces attacking. Even if they check, you could just play king h8, and that seems pretty safe. Queen takes g4, and let's see, and if they don't take, let's say they take like b7 or something, and they don't really want to be a pawn, they don't want to really lose a pawn. I suppose you still could trade queens and then play knight to g4 and still have the pin on the bishop. That looks a little too unforcing, though. Huh. Well, I think this might be a good time to drop the skip. I've gone 88 puzzles without using it. This one, I don't know. This has a feeling of it like you know, if you go for something that looks obvious, that it's not going to be right. Um, if I had to guess, I would say queen takes g4, but that's so unforcing. So I'm gonna use my skip here. This is a little too complicated. Knight f4. So that was the way to use the pin, was to play knight to f4, so that way the bishop couldn't take and it hit the queen. So, all right, I didn't see knight to f4. So I did see the pin, but I didn't see that this was a way to exploit this. So here, wow. I guess we could take the bishop. Rook takes. Black can also take this bishop. That might even be better. Take that bishop, queen takes, and then grab on e3, which wins a piece. Taking on e3, rook take. If you take on e3 first, rook takes, queen takes, and that leads to nothing. So let's liquidate the knight. And that was it. Okay. So I had to burn my skip. So you can see here that the skip is gone. So now everything, next time I get a tough position, I actually have to do it on my own. And that's that. So everybody gets one skip per streak. Okay. So let's move on here. Here we have checks. We have a check on f2, which undermines g3, which is an interesting thing. So, and that's a check and a capture. We got a check and a capture right away, which looks insane, and nothing else. We have a capture on b2, which picks up a useless pawn. So that's probably not it. And that's that. So threats. Let's see. b5 is a threat. d5 is a threat. What I like about d5 is that you're making two threats. You're attacking the rook and the queen. If the queen captures on d5 and tries to pin the bishop to the queen, this queen's guarded. So we could play d5, queen takes d5, and pick up an entire rook here. I don't see anything better. So let's do that. Be there, be there. Yes, gimme. All right, we're up to 90. Ooh, here's one from an opening. Let's check out the moves here. So French, Rati. Black does not accept the gambit pawn. And now we have like Shigorin chess here. Ooh, knight takes d5, doing a disco on g7. So capture, and here comes g7, and then bishop f6. So evidently this is a really good combination here for white. Okay, so checks, captures, threats. Let's see. We have e takes d5 is check, which looks kind of nice. Interesting thing about ed is that if knight ce7 to get out of the attack, white could play bishop takes rook, but then bishop takes bishop. The bishop could take the rook, but maybe black would take the bishop, not the. So that doesn't look very forcing. So okay, so that's the only check. Let's see, e takes, knight ce7. Okay, well, let's get back to that one. Okay, so if bishop takes rook, then I assume bishop takes bishop, not bishop takes rook, because if bishop takes rook, then this bishop in the corner will follow and go and collect him. And then after takes, then the rook, you could play c3 or rook d1 or whatever. But then black might have some counterplay there. So that's probably not right. Taking on f6, black can just develop. So that doesn't look good. Bishop takes rook, bishop takes bishop, e takes d. And those are the captures. And then threats, well, let's see. E5, bishop takes g7, that's nothing. Taking once and then e5, that's nothing. Taking once and then check. I think he still plays knight ce7. Uh-oh. Okay, well, and a bishop is being attacked. So that basically means that we're basically down to like bishop takes rook or e takes d, just because of that. I mean, there's really no other moves. So let's see, bishop takes rook, bishop takes bishop, then e takes d, knight ce7. I don't know. That doesn't look so wonderful. I'll bet that that's the answer, but that doesn't look interspectacular to do that. All right, so in order to avoid any Zwischenzugs here, so like if I see that if I take on h8, black might have knight d4 as a Zwischenzug. So if we're going to do this, I think we have to play pawn takes pawn first and make it check, make this knight retreat itself, and then pick up the rook and then decide what to do with our rook in the corner. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's the solution, but I mean, whatever. Let's go for that. Be there, be there, be there. Yes. And then let's take the rook. Oh, I blew it. And that was that. Okay, so what was the answer? So I got it wrong. So the answer was not to take the rook, it was to take the bishop. And then when knight takes queen e5, thus creating a pin. Okay, I did not see that. Castles, and then take on f6. And that was the end of it. All right. Well, so we got up to 90. We'll start a new streak some other time. But I just wanted to do this video here to show the importance of practicing check, captures, and threats. Puzzles are a great way to do this, and then transfer this skill to your regular games. This ought to help you, help any player, anywhere in the world. Anyway, this has been Coach Matt from the Seattle Chess School. This has been Puzzle Practice, and hope you guys enjoyed that. And we shall see you guys on the next one.